All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Juan Carlos Lopez. I am coming to you from Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I say that as a to acknowledge that that's where I am, and also to acknowledge that I am an person in this journey of learning. And as a good friend of mine says, I'm committed to listening, and then when I'm done listening, I'm gonna sit down and listen some more because I want to learn the truth, and with that, hopefully move towards reconciliation. I also want to acknowledge that I also want to acknowledge the presence of people of African descent who have been coming to this land for the past at least 400 years. And I do this again in the spirit of learning what has happened, how that and how their life have been impacted through the process of colonization. And I do this, with a commitment to again learn and change for a better future for everyone. So that's my little piece. So I am the director of teaching and learning for the Maple League of Universities, and as many of you know, because you have joined us before, this is our series of talks better together. So today is a very special day because we have a panel, right? And we have a panel of people from Acadia University and Mount Allison. And they are going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about it. We're going to be talking about oral assessments. And I'm really excited for this panel, and I won't take more time. I will let Danielle do the introductions and all that. But I'm really excited about this panel because not only we're working together in different schools, but also we're working across, we're working with different disciplines. So you will see, I'm really looking forward to learning with my colleagues. And with that, I'm gonna let Danielle Pierce take it away. So it's all yours, Danielle.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Danielle Pierce. I'm an instructional designer at Acadia University. I also occupy lands in Mi'kma'ki and benefit greatly from that. And like Juan Carlos, I'm also committed to listening and learning as best I can to be as good of an ally as I possibly can. And today I'm really thrilled to be joined by a number of faculty to discuss an alternative assessment style. And we're going to approach this from a number of different angles as well as different disciplines, as Juan Carlos mentioned. And it's about oral assessment. So let's talk about it. First, I'd like to just give a brief introduction of our panelists who are all here. We're first going to hear from Hélène and Jen Kershaw. Hélène started working at Acadia University as a microbiology technician in 1994, and she's been an instructor since 2000, teaching microbial biodiversity, cell and molecular biology, and more recently applied environmental microbiology labs. Jen has been, sorry, my grid of people was covering my description of Jen. Jen has been teaching botany courses and labs at Acadia for 6 years, and her background is in rare plant ecology. She's also worked as a classroom teacher in the public system, teaching French. Same here, Jen. Toni Roberts joins us from Mount Allison University, where he has been teaching for 19 years and is the director of the Purdy Crawford Teaching Center, as well as a professor in sociology. Toni is a 3M National Teaching Fellow and the winner of the D2L National Teaching Innovation Award. And Toni's research interests include sexuality, gender, technology, digital environments, and the scholarship of teaching and learning. And last, but certainly not least, we'll hear from Donna Seamone, who is Associate Professor of Comparative Religion and holds the Lumsden Chair in Religious Studies at Acadia University. She also serves as a core faculty member in the Women and Gender Studies program. Prior to coming to Acadia in 2006, she taught at Wilfrid Laurier and McMaster Universities. Her research spans the interdisciplinary range indicated by her teaching, and her main recent research proficiencies are in the performance of ritual and ethnographic approaches to the study of lived religion. She focuses on religious systems as cultures, on the interface between religion and culture, and on issues of gender, ethnicity, race, class, and nature. She loves to teach and loves to learn. So first off, we're going to hear from Hélène d'Entremont and Jen Kershaw, who are going to talk about how they use oral assessment as a form of summative assessment in their labs. So I will invite you to take it away.
Hi there, my name's Jen Kershaw, and my collaborator Hélène and I have been using oral lab reports to assess students as part of a suite of different kinds of assessments to sort of increase the diversity of our assessment toolkit to hopefully sort of meet more students where they're at and where their strengths are. So this image is from last spring when we were all still masked, and you can see me and some of my students working through an oral assessment together. Danielle, can you go ahead? All right, so I should say that Hélène introduced me to this concept and asked like, what would I think about maybe trying this out in my labs? And what you'll hear from us is that we have each approached it a little bit differently. And so you can see that there's a really wide range of how you might be able to apply oral assessment, whether it's in a classroom or in a lab. So the way that I have done it in my lab is that I allow the students to have the questions in advance, and they follow much of what you would have in a traditional lab report. So you can see that on the rubric on the side, and don't worry about the details, but it's just to show that that is what the students have ahead of time in my case, and then the TA and I go through and just check things off as they say them or explain them. So again, we do it a little bit differently. I'm able to have the students sign up for an interview block within the lab. So they're doing the lab work, and then when they're done, they sign up on a sheet, and then the TA does 6 groups and I do 6 groups, and we're able to work through it within the lab period. So one of the things that's great about that is that the students get the feedback right away before the lab is even done, and can correct any misconceptions, right out of the gate. And the other thing that I like about it is that we can really get at what the students understand. If they write a sentence in a lab report, you can't really interrogate that. You can't say, well, do they understand what those words mean? But if you are able to have a student give an answer and they say, oh, well, how do you know that? And they can justify it and, going to give you more detail, you can get a much deeper sense of their understanding and catch misconceptions before, like Hélène said, they go on to, build on those skills, they have a good solid foundation. Okay, Danielle. So here's an example of a different rubric, and all of these resources will be in a folder at the end that you can access. And of course, you can always contact myself or Hélène if you want lab-specific examples. But there's a few papers that have been published with other people's work looking at oral lab reports, specifically in a research or in a lab setting. So here is just an excerpt of one of the rubrics that a different professor uses for their biochem labs. Okay, Danielle.
Hi, I'm Hélène d'Entremont. And so I haven't done oral lab reports for a little while. I think it was 2019. And so then COVID hit, we were masked, and the specific lab report that we were doing had to do with isolating organisms from the nose. And so it sort of went against everything COVID related. We couldn't take our masks off, and we weren't going to swab noses and expose all those germs in the room. So that's when I asked Jen if she wanted to try this out, and I went in lab with her as well. So I was going to do a lab this year, but because of timing, it just didn't work out. I'll discuss that a little bit more, but my rubric is a little different. So I provide worksheets to students in lab every time they have a lab. And I try to give them somewhat of a template so that they know before they leave what maybe their table is going to look like on their lab report, or a graph. And so they have a visual, I'm a visual learner, so I like to show that to students as well, so that when before they leave, they know, oh, this is about what my lab report might look like. So I did the same thing with a worksheet and only a few pieces of information that they needed. And so this table 1 was just when they were in lab, they were identifying organisms through colony morphology, cell morphology, and a few tests. And so at the bottom of this sheet, it was just questions that they would normally include in a discussion of a lab report. So rather than give them all of the questions, they just had to sort of have an idea of what they needed to know before they came to the oral report. If you could move to the next one, Danielle. So this is just a picture of an example of an agar plate where some colonies have been growing for a little while, and it actually is a nose isolation agar plate. And so the TA, I would have 2 TAs in the room. I should have backed up. So students sign up for a specific time. And what we tried to do was stagger the students by a couple of minutes so that they didn't all come in at once. So that one of the TAs would provide the student with a plate and ask them a bunch of questions. Now, the questions weren't difficult ones. They would have known this information well ahead of time because they would have done that in the lab. So it was more of a, let's calm down. This is not supposed to be anxiety, inducing. And so I felt as though students sitting with the TAs and almost seeing them check off, yep, you've got everything, you've got all your information, made students just feel more at ease and confident. And so if you want to move to the next one. So as I said, we would stagger the students. And so once they finished with the TA for maybe 3 minutes, they would come to me, and then I would ask more deeper questions. I would also get the opportunity to listen to them correctly pronounce their bacterial names, which we don't get to do very often. But over the course of the lab, they get some information on how to pronounce bacterial names. And so they get to practice them. And then finally, they get to say them to me during this oral report. And so I go deeper into, how did you know you had this organism? How could you tell you didn't have this one? At the end, if you notice my question E, did you prefer an oral report over a written one? Most of them said, I thought I was gonna not like this at all because I was really anxious in the beginning, but I loved it. So quick. I got to actually give you information that sometimes I cannot write. I'm not a good writer. I wanted to tell you what I knew. And so we've heard that a lot. So that was nice to hear at that time. You can move to the next one. This is just to show you, you don't have to read the whole thing. A good paper by Paul and Elder, Critical Thinking, the Art of Socratic Questioning. Just the types of question, clarify this for me. Provide me some reasons and evidence. For me, a lot of the questioning came from, how did you know that you had this? How did you know you didn't have this one? And so by looking up information, background information through the literature, they were supposed to really understand their results. It also provided me with a moment where you ask a question and you see the light bulb and they go, oh, now I get it. And so they're able to actually provide you more information than they even thought they knew. And so you just dig deeper into their knowledge. I'm not sure if I have another slide. Oh, okay. So one of the challenges, I was hoping to do it this year, but it does require a lot of time. And so if you look at the first on the challenges side, requires a lot of in-person time and time for an instructor to learn and become comfortable with a new way of evaluating. You sort of have to plan ahead to see if within the fall break, within some holidays that fall into your schedule, are you going to be able to do this? And so for me this year, I wasn't able to fit it in because of the number of student appointments I would have to do. It is hard to change, but once you've gotten some ideas from maybe some colleagues, it's not that difficult. The benefits are, there are more benefits than challenges in some cases. Challenges are big, but there's good benefits. They get to practice their oral skills, quick feedback, academic dishonesty, because they really have to understand what they're saying to you. And it does make them dig deeper and look into more information and not just write it out and then forget about it. And so you get better retention in that way as well. I think that's it for me. Back to Jen.
So just as a parting quote from a student in a paper that was published on this topic, I thought really resonated, even though it's from a chemistry perspective. The student said, I like the lab interviews. I like them a lot better than having you do post labs or like the lab reports. Like in Gen Chem or organic chemistry, we would have to do 5 post lab questions. And I feel like that doesn't really help you because you could just look them up online. But in an interview, it forces you to think on the spot, constantly be aware of what you're doing in the lab and pay attention during the lab. What you were doing and write down observations. It really forces you to really work in the lab. Whereas like in general chemistry or organic chemistry, you could cheat your way through it. So that was something that, Hélène and I found really resonated with things that students were saying, is that they want to understand, they want to be able to leave the class with a deep and meaningful set of skills. And this is a tool that helps them be more motivated and get more out of the labs and be able to demonstrate that more genuinely, and they can't cheat. They are motivated to know it for themselves, because lab reports are notorious for cheating. And we have really great students, but when they're under the gun, sometimes those temptations are there, and this is a way to prevent that. So that's it from Hélène and I. I'm going to have to step out in a few minutes because I have to go teach a lab, but thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time, and any questions you might have, you're welcome to email.
And I'd like to add that because I don't have time to schedule all of my students for a oral report interview, I'm going to invite them to do a little audio. I'll have a few questions for them to discuss in the very, very short audio, and I'll have a rubric for my TAs and myself to be able to mark this. So sort of a good alternative, I thought. But thank you very much. I have to go to lab as well.
Thank you so much, Jen and Hélène. Really appreciate you being here today. And as Jen mentioned, I have a nice little packaged folder all set for anyone who's here on the call today who's interested in those resources that they shared that will be available at the end of the presentation. Next, we're moving on to using oral assessment as a form of pre-assessment with Toni Roberts. Toni, I invite you to take it away.
Thank you so much, Danielle. Hello, everyone. I'm Toni Roberts. I'm at Mount Allison. And we used to call it fudging the data when I was a chem student. We didn't call it cheating, but I digress. I started about 4 years ago, starting to do kind of an oral assessment as pre-assessment. So rather than do pre-course surveys, which I used to do, I decided to start looking into alternatives. I think about alternatives. So I started setting up what I called and still call, because I'm very creative, 15-minute meetings, because they're 15 minutes and they're meetings. I'm open to suggestions, by the way, if you have better ideas. So what I've done with those is set these up as required 15-minute meetings with students. Now, occasionally I've done them as optional, and I've sort of played with that a little bit, but I do like making them required, to be honest. I was worried that the very people who need it most may be the folks who don't sign up if it's optional. And part of my motivation here was to partially get to know the students better. I'm of the era of bell hooks, and the whole student and so on, and even before that, Paulo Freire. And so I like this idea of getting to know students better, getting to know what some of their challenges are and what have you. But I'll get into that in a little more detail in a moment. Now, I use a really simple way to meet students, and that's mostly with Teams. Now, you could do it face-to-face, but I find Teams is really clean because I can go from one student to another. No one's waiting outside my door and so on. And I use a Moodle scheduler. So in Moodle, I just schedule a number of options, and you can then pick it and use Teams. Now, people could use Calendly if anyone has, signed up for that. That might be another way to set these up. So essentially, I can go quickly from one meeting to another, and it's also rather convenient for the students to use Teams. They don't have to come to my office and so on. Danielle, could we have next, please? So I do share with the students the purpose of the meetings. So it's an opportunity for us to get to know one another. Again, whole student, whole, teacher, whole person. And it also gives them an opportunity to discuss any barriers, whether they're current or whether they're anticipated to their learning in the course. So those could be structural issues, right? So maybe they experience and have experienced, racism, classism, rainbow phobia, and so on. They can be personal things that are going on in their lives. I've had people tell me about significant health problems immediate family members have, and that might have an impact on what's going on for their learning. Any learning disabilities they may have that might be important for me to know about. Now, at Mount Allison, we do get notifications about those learning disabilities from our MEAN Center, which is our Center for Students with Disabilities. But it's also nice sometimes to talk about those things directly. But I also want to know what I can do to help them with their learning. So this is an opportunity for that as well. Finally, I want to ask them what they hope to learn about. What are their learning goals in the course? Sometimes they're funny because it might be, I just want to see. That's my learning goal in the class. But most of the time, it's not. Most of the time, it's they're very interested in the topic and the material and what have you. So we do talk through those. I do also allow them to ask questions about the course. Maybe they need a little bit of clarification about something or other in terms of maybe the assessment or the structure of the course or something like that. And anything else that they may want to share or discuss. So could be things about prior knowledge about the course materials, if they work and how that might, be something they're working around, scheduling around. Children, pronouns. I don't explicitly ask about pronouns. There's a good reason for that. But I want them to also feel comfortable talking about their pronouns if they would like to. Danielle, could we have the next one, please? So some of these have already been mentioned. Jen and Hélène mentioned this can be a bit time consuming, especially with larger classes. So let's be honest, this is not something you're going to be doing with 180 students, unfortunately. Some feel it's kind of not the faculty's responsibility to get, I've heard that one from faculty. Well, it's not my responsibility to develop trust with a student or to, meet with them and what have you. They need to come to me. So this is my attempt to kind of reach out. But some faculty don't feel that it's their responsibility. As I mentioned, maybe small to what we might call a medium class. So maybe 40, once you get beyond 40, it becomes more time consuming, something to think about in terms of whether it's feasible or not. I love the development of the relationships between myself and the students. It's only 15 minutes and it's amazing what you learn and what students share. It also gives you an opportunity to communicate your care and compassion to students. And also, again, it's only 15 minutes, but it's amazing how much trust you can develop in that really short period of time. There's a richness and a depth of information. I do qualitative research and we talk about sort of richness and depth of information and data. So that is certainly coming through in these as well. It helps us all understand sort of one another, that idea of the whole person, the whole student, and what have you. And I think it contributes, although this is kind of anecdotal, but in this case, but I know, and I have read research about the success that can come from a relationships of care and trust that you develop with students. So the success of the students is also at play here, and I think it helps in that regard. I think there might be that might be it for me. Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. But I did just want to ask if you could potentially expand on that anecdotal information about how you feel taking the pulse of the room at the beginning of the term before you even necessarily jump into assessments that have grades assigned and things like that. How have you personally felt that taking that time in the beginning has impacted how the term is rolled out?
Well, it makes it that I'm much more responsive. It means that I'm prepared. If Danielle is in my class and says, this thing is happening, and there may be a situation where I need a little more time on an assignment, or I may be distracted, or what have you. Just having that understanding, I think, is really significant, and knowing, okay, Danielle is going through something. I knew something might be happening. And maybe now you also share that with me and say, hey, Toni, this thing, remember we talked about this and I said this might happen. And so I can then modify, and we can have a discussion about what we can do about that. So does an extension help? Does a different kind of assessment help? Can we do, in fact, I do this with students anyway, an actual oral assessment toward the end of the or midterm? Is that more helpful than writing a paper or doing something else? So it starts to intersect with universal design principles as well here. And so it makes me a more sort of aware faculty teacher, a more compassionate teacher. And I think that helps in terms of being more attentive to and responsive to student needs.
That's great. Thanks so much for sharing, Toni. Next, we're going to talk about oral assessment as a form of formative assessment with Donna Seamone, who does sort of a critical intervention with her students prior to a major assessment to make sure that they're prepared and they can be as successful as possible. Donna, I'll invite you to take it away.
Yes, so hello everyone, and the acknowledgements of land and communities have been made, so I won't do that again. Just to situate what I'm talking about, I use this process in both women and gender studies courses and in religious studies classes. So, and I used to teach in environmental studies and used it there as well. So it is not discipline specific necessarily. And when you see the slide, the diagrams and so on that I use, the rubric is that I've posted for you to have is for a second-year course. So they are to submit a proposal and annotated bibliography for a thesis-driven essay, and this happens at about a little past the halfway mark for the course, or at the halfway mark for the semester, rather. And I don't grade, to be clear, I grade the bibliography in relation to the topic. I do not grade the proposal. And I tell them this, and both writing in the syllabus and in class prior to the meetings, because I want them to be able to be honest and not self-conscious in how they write the proposal. I want them to be as clear as possible, but I want them to articulate what the difficulty they're having in formulating the thesis for the essay, or wherever they have the problem, right? And so that we can make use of the time we have together to actually help them where help is needed. And it is an intervention at an early stage of, pre-writing of the paper. So it's not, some students reach out and have already met with me about the assignment in regular office hours. I meet with each student, and sort of, when Toni was talking, I wanted to say ditto to a number of the things he said, but I do these meetings, they usually take 25 minutes, and I have a 5-minute break between each. So it is a big time commitment, and I do use it. I have a class of nearly 60 this semester, and I'm doing it. Now, I would say that when I grade an annotated bibliography on paper or wherever, it takes me between 15 and 20 minutes to write comments and to do it. So really, we're looking at 5 or 10 minutes more for this interaction. Next slide, please. Oh, can we go back? I forgot to mention the diagram that was there. Just the paper process diagram. I found myself drawing this diagram for years, meeting with students. And finally, I made it into a file and handed it out to them because, so the arrow is where they're going to be when they meet with me in the paper writing process. So these two assignments are related. They must write, their proposal must be on the topic they intend to write about in the essay. What else did I want to say about that? Nothing, I guess. That's good. Thank you. So I wanted to describe the meetings that we have. And before the students meet with me, they have these outlines for the annotations. They have a sample bibliography or two posted on Moodle. They have all of the handouts you're seeing are there for them, some of them in the syllabus, sometimes as a separate file. So they have a sample assignment, a sheet on Chicago style, the rubric I'll be using, and the samples and the syllabus description. So they have a lot of resources to get them ready to do this. And I wanted to, when we talked as a group before this presentation, I teach in the area, my research is qualitative research in the area of ritual and life story. And I really have, I've been doing these meetings since 2007. We had a strike at Acadia in the fall of 2007. It was my second year at Acadia. I came here from McMaster, where I taught 1,000 students a year, to where I teach maybe 200 students a year, right? And new possibilities emerged. But we had the strike in October. And when we came back to school, there wasn't a lot of time left in the semester. Students were nervous. And so I started meeting with them individually to help them move toward completion of the course. And that's how this began. I did it then on Skype before Teams was a thing. I also did it in person, but now I have switched entirely to doing it on Teams because it is actually more face-to-face in a sense, if you can get your head to take that in, and more intimate in a way, because they're in their room or, right, I'm in my home office, and their work is at the center of our meeting. I share my screen, I pull up a Turnitin copy of their assignment so they can see the markings from Turnitin, and they can, right, it's all there in front of us, and we focus on that. At the beginning of the meeting, it is ritualized in a sense. I sometimes say that I treat it as a sort of meditative activity, and that's the kind of focus it takes to do this in that length of time. So you have to be efficient with your use of time and appear like you're not rushing. So that takes us, it's a kind of receptive posture I put myself in. And we always start with greeting or a check-in. How are you doing? If I haven't met with a student previously, I'll ask them what their major is if I don't remember from when they've done their class introduction or something, right? And then I explain what will happen. And the first thing I say is, nothing terrible will happen in the next 25 minutes, 20 minutes, right? The worst thing that could happen is that I will give you the assignment back and let you make the changes and resubmit it. So if you see me marking things up, I've read all of these in the morning before the meeting, so they're in my head. But then we scan the proposal and come back to it later in the meeting. But they also want to, I want them to re-enter their own work And then I put the outline for the annotation and the thesis paragraph in the team's chat in case they've missed it in the course materials. And then I go through the annotations one by one and using that checklist, which I tell them to open their chat so they can see what I'm talking about. Next slide, please. Then I bring, once we've gone through the annotations, and sometimes I stop partway through because I've already said, I can just say, the rest of these are perfect, right? You've done a great job. You've followed the outline. I don't need to go, the sources are, I can make sort of summary comments about assessment without going through each one individually. In the cases where, for example, they've submitted an annotated bibliography with only 2 peer-reviewed sources and 5 of them are non-peer-reviewed, and it's clear from the rubric that they need 7 for an 8 to 10 page paper, right? I changed that number if it's a first-year class and a shorter paper. We talked through each of the the rubric as I mark it, I highlight it in the meeting. At the end of that, I assign a grade and send them the file in email so they have record of their grade and why they got it. Then we go back to the proposal to discuss and wordsmith a thesis paragraph or outline the necessary work they have to do to get to being able to do that, whatever it is that they need the help with. Next slide. Okay. Benefits and drawbacks. Let me do the drawbacks first. The time commitment. I've already said it takes between 5 and 10 minutes longer per student when you have 60 students, as I do in the one class this semester. You can do the math. I can't stop doing it. I've thought about stopping doing it. I've thought about not giving them the chance to resubmit, and I can't do it because I really believe this is what schools should be like. You should be able to get feedback and do better. And the gratitude that instills from the students is immense. And it moves us from talk. It really switches the frame. If you look at the benefits, it shifts emphasis from evaluation to teaching and learning. And that's the main benefit of all this for both me and for the students. I don't know a professor who likes grading. Maybe you do, or you're one and you can tell me about it, but I don't. I got tired, and I always tell my students, I'm older than the gods, pick one, and I don't want to die and have only written in the margins. I really want to know my students, and Toni expressed that. So, you know, I'm even of an older era. I met Bell Hooks before she was Bell Hooks. So I've been moving in that way with my teaching anyway. It fosters relationships with them. They retain more of the feedback, and there is lots of research to show this. That's I have a teaching praxis, not a philosophy, so I tend to do things, and then I find out that someone's written about it. Danielle, I always have to call her and say, I had to call her last winter and say, what's that thing called I do, right? And it was oral assessments. I can give them critical feedback at a stage that can help them do better on the final assignment, and they can see that, right? And they find additional sources if they need them. We go on the library website, I search with them, I show them what they may have missed, help formulating a thesis, setting them up for success. I can see that it is their work, right? You know very quickly whether they've done the work. Because if I say, what did you mean to say here? So I actually am giving feedback on writing as well, both positive and for improvement. And I can identify and support learning disabilities or differences, cultural differences, whatever the case. And encourage disciplined curiosity. If you probably know what I mean by that, right? Of course, the students are nervous at the outset. And the biggest challenge is getting them to sign up on Acorn, on our Moodle. But I do right now I'm teaching from home because my mother is immune compromised. So my contact with the world is through Teams. And so I've actually found that I do know my students really well. And I've been able to do this in such a way. And part of it's because of this. Next slide, and then I'll stop. I think I have a minute and a half. So this is a quote from my application letter to Acadia. I love to teach. At the heart of my teaching is a love of inquiry. I'm committed to exploring with students critical ways to think about and understand human experience, especially the role of religion in shaping and embodying culture. Further, in my experience, teaching and learning are intertwined privileges for students and instructors alike. I understand the educational task of the university as engagement in an enterprise which aims to form, shape, and equip whole persons as thoughtful citizens who are committed to lifelong learning and humane engagement in global community. So I wrote that before it was in vogue to say those kinds of things. I'm a first-gen student myself who came to university not knowing what it was. And I find that this practice allows me to support other people who find themselves in that role, or people who come from privilege, but don't feel themselves up to it, right? So meeting the students where they are is really an important part. I think kindness and honesty, and I would say both, giving real feedback and saying, this sentence makes no sense to me. Read it out loud. And then they hear that it doesn't make any sense. So then we rewrite it so that it does. And that really helps. And I could go on and on. I won't. I'll stop there. EDI, it is an intersectional approach to teaching and learning that I'm doing. So that.
Thank you so much, Donna. Really appreciate that. Thanks to all our panelists today. The resources that they have compiled for anyone on the call who is interested can be found by scanning this QR code, or if you're a super fast typer, you could maybe type this, or perhaps somebody might pop it in the chat. I would just love to open the floor for any kind of conversation or questions folks would like to ask our panelists. The link to the drive is in the chat for anyone who is interested.
Brent had a question. Brent, do you want to ask your question before Hélène goes?
I'm trying to
Brent
remember
was
what
my
my question
student
was.
NTA a long time ago. Hi, Brent.
Hi. Yeah, so my question, I guess, is this idea of, would you ever consider to really make the whole lab an oral assessment based course? Or do you think that, you know, there still needs to be the writing element? It's just like going to the extreme here.
Are you asking me specific? Well, Jen's gone.
Well, yeah, whoever wants to talk about that, I guess, in terms of like labs.
So I guess depending on which lab you're teaching, at Acadia, we have a few core labs where students have now some choice. So they have to take cell and molecular course and lab, and then they have choice between plant, micro, and animal. And so if we can, as a department, make sure that they get some writing in one of the courses or a couple, and then maybe, so my lab is more skills based than identifying or learning specific, I don't know, parts or something. And so I guess if students know, or if we decide as a department where, okay, micro is going to be the place where you learn pipetting and aseptic technique and oral reports, I'd be quite happy with that, as long as we can sort of figure out the timing and just make it work. But it would just mean planning way ahead of time on how you do your labs and when you do some oral reports, and not do it at the end, but more like what Donna said, where you make sure that, okay, you identified this wrong, and that's okay. What did you do wrong? And how can you learn from it and then move on? And then it's kind of like the little skills practice that we pipette over and over and over again until they get it right. or some of the techniques they do, they keep repeating the same thing but in a different experiment. And so with the oral reports, I would love to actually have it all oral myself.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah, of course.
So I guess you bring up an interesting point, which is, I guess, if it's in a core class or not. So I guess I wonder, do you feel there needs to be a certain amount of buy-in from the department and also some marketing in terms of this is going to be in your class and it's going to be a positive experience, and letting the students who might want to take your class know that? Because I could just imagine a scenario where, you know, word gets out that your course is going to have an oral assessment. You know, the students maybe initially don't like that idea, but they do love it in the end. So like you have to kind of get them to buy in, I guess, a little bit before they would, because I
Maybe
I would
maybe
hesitate
have, like,
to think, I guess
audio
I would
clips
just maybe, yeah, because I'm just thinking
from
a scenario
previous
where, you
students.
know, you
Yeah.
don't want to get into a place where students totally avoid your course because they're afraid of the oral assessment that might be there. So yeah, I guess buy-in from the department and marketing, you think that's important?
Yes, and I think so. One of the when Jen and I presented at a conference this summer, we actually had two little audio clips from students who had done regular lab reports for the lab that I'm actually just about to do. And when I told them that what we were going to do in this conference was talk about oral reports, and one of the students right away said, "Oral reports, oh my God, that's so much better." And so we got her to repeat
Okay.
that,
Okay.
record it, and put it into our presentation.
Mhm.
And so she actually told other students, and they came to me later and said, "We heard that there used to be oral reports. Why don't we do them anymore?" And so
Okay.
I think there could be buy-in,
Okay, cool.
and there could be choice, because you could do a audio clip file that I'm going to do this year.
Mhm.
So it could maybe take the edge off.
Think that, yeah, okay, interesting, thanks.
That's great. Thanks for that question. I see that Suzanne has their hand up. Suzanne, would you like to ask a question?
Sure. I had a quick question for Toni, and Toni, I might have missed it, but I just wondered if you gave any points for what you do. But then my overall question was whether or not any of you have thought about oral assessment in the context of artificial intelligence, because it's one of those things that I hear people saying, well, try oral assessment instead, like because you can see the student doing it, and but none of you obviously you're probably all doing it long before that, so right, fine, but I'm just wondering now, with the advent of sort of on everybody sort of, oh my God, what are we going to do? It's like you guys are already kind of doing it, so kind of interested in what you're thinking about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Suzanne. So I do not give the students any points. Most times I just say it's required. You have to sign up for a slot, and that's the end of that. And they don't seem to resist that. They seem pretty good. But you're also right about generative AI. So you probably over the last little less than around a year have read a lot about how to respond to generative AI. And one of the things you may have read about is oral assessment, because it's hard to fake, right? Donna was mentioning this. It's sort of like you ask Juan Carlos, so explain to me what a redox equation is. And if Juan Carlos can't do that, then that means Juan Carlos doesn't know what a redox equation is. So there are immediate ways that like, as Donna again said, whether you're faking it or not. So yeah, it kind of solves that entire problem, really. Thanks, Suzanne.
Yeah, if I could just quickly jump in, I did mention it, but very fast, right? And I didn't say AI, so I said you can tell whether it's their work. And that's really what I was talking about. And I do think we're a step ahead. I sort of breathed a sigh of relief. In fact, when Danielle and I first started talking about doing such a panel, it was as a response to AI, right? So, and not just that, but plagiarism. You know, Turnitin will identify plagiarized text, but so it does that, and I show that to the students. I don't take it away, and I give them a chance to fix it, right? But also with AI, I can tell, especially if I've read, they also do weekly reflections. So I've been reading their weekly reflections for 6 to 8 weeks by the time we get to this. And I know if they wrote their weekly reflection and then they had in this perfectly, but vague, like, let me just say AI, I've tried all my assignments on AI, and you don't get more than a 40 from me on AI, because I'm always saying I'm an anthropologist, more or less by training. And so they have to be reflexive, and AI can't be reflexive. They can't situate themselves as a knower. And so you get this abstract, very loose text, right? So that's enough, but I just, I don't know if that's helpful to hear, but it does, you will know, right? You will know if you've been teaching at all, if even for a few years, I can imagine, right? You know whether this does provide a chance to intervene.
And I just also quickly note that Turnitin is not actually very effective. It doesn't catch most plagiarism. It is not even near 50%, and it's considered one of the best. So just you know, a little reminder.
Yes, and it doesn't, the AI checker is not to be trusted, right? Just not. It's terrible.
Are there any other questions for our panelists today? We have a question in the chat from Matea. She asks, do your universities have policies on Turnitin? No, I think Acadia has an institutional license for it, but not
policy.
a policy about how to use it.
Yeah, we've had faculty ask about Turnitin and whether we should or can get a license. They're terribly expensive, as many of you know, and because they're not really that effective, I don't necessarily recommend them. There used to be one out of Australia with a terrible name called Doc Cop that was free. And I used to play with that one just to sort of demonstrate it mostly.
Tony, I actually have used Turnitin because it cuts down on semester to semester cheating, and I don't have to change my assignments. I remember when I was teaching at Mac, getting an essay in and reading it and thinking, I read this essay before. And it was a sister of a student who had submitted it the previous year. And I figured it out, right? But I couldn't do anything about it, right? And Turnitin, so I would say a word in Turnitin's defense. It does pick up a lot of online journal articles, right? It is pretty good on that. And it's good on semester to semester and course to course cheating. So I don't get someone handing in a classics paper in a religious studies class. So that it's useful for, and that's why I use it.
Right.
I didn't want to be a cop, and it doesn't do the whole job, but it does a substantial part of it.
Yeah.
And mostly as a deterrent.
Yeah, well, that's it. But it also means that that student data is now part of Turnitin. It uses it as its data.
But I have yet to find a student whose writing is so good that that's a problem.
Someone's asking, Brent's asking, can you speak a bit more about how your colleagues view your use of oral assessment? It's true, there are a few people who think, oh, you know, that we're moving away from essential skills of writing and composing and so on. But most people, I can't speak to the rest, of course, but most people think, oh, that's kind of interesting. Can you tell me more about that? And I also use it this way. I do a lot of ungrading, and I still use a rubric just to give students an idea of like where they are, if they want a rubric, even though I don't grade it that way. But then I also video myself giving them feedback. And then I give them feedback to the entire class about how they did and what sorts of things that I saw. So that's another way, in a sense. It's not an oral, it's a formative oral response, I suppose. But you know, and I do get faculty asking me about that as well. But there are some, I think you've hit on something, Brent, there, where they think, oh, you know, like literacy, we're moving away from it, and it's a real problem. But overall, I would say positive. I'm not sure about the rest.
Yeah, Donna, do you have any feelings on that? Have you had any responses from colleagues around one way or the other around your use of oral assessment?
I am such an odd duck because I am the only person teaching in my discipline, although my courses are cross-listed all over the place. In women and gender studies, the previous I don't know that they even know I do it unless I hear it from students. But in women and gender studies, the program directors have been very positive because they see the results in their class when they teach like a third year class, right? And so the people I have positive feedback, or from when I used to do it in my office, my neighbor became interested in it in the next office because you could hear through the walls on the fourth floor. And he said if he had to listen to feedback on one more paper on Scientology, he was going to slit his wrist. But otherwise, that was a joke, by the way. I'm sorry if it's inappropriate, but that is what he said. I think the time really, like, the time required from some of the people is off-putting. And I would say, if you don't really think that knowing your students is important to teaching them, I wouldn't do it, because you wouldn't want to be good at it. Now, that's a waste of time to say here, right? Because people sign up because they have interest, right? But, you know, I have colleagues who lecture, right? And I never teach only by lecture, right? So this fits with how the students know me. So I think, like Toni, you do it early, but they're predisposed from class to know that I will challenge them, but I won't do it with a hammer. But I will do it firmly, right? So I really do think and I tell the students that I'm not doing them a favor if I don't give them my strongest critique, because that is how you improve, right? Is by knowing where you went wrong. So I don't know. I don't even know if they know. I was pleased to be asked to do this because I've been doing it silently, you know, for all these years.
Well, I'm so pleased that you agreed to do this. And I'm so thankful all of our panelists agreed to participate today. As I mentioned, the resources they have kindly provided are available in the Google Drive. The link is in the chat, or you can scan the QR code. I'll invite Juan Carlos to come back and close us out, since we have hit our time.
We have hit the 101, but I'm really grateful for everyone's time, and thank you. This was a wonderful talk. So there is something we do. Danielle, can I ask you to please stop sharing your screen, and at your own comfort, if you want to please turn on your camera and just wave goodbye and thank the speakers. You know, that's something that we kind of do to thank them for their time. Thank you very much, and you will be hearing back from me with a recording and so on and so forth later. Thank you.
Well, I think I should thank you and Danielle on behalf of the panel, right? Because it has been a joy to work with you. We're lucky to have you both doing what you do, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks, Donna. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.